Welcome to the second video of our SignIn demo series. And in this video, we'll continue building our SignIn page. So after we created the blue background in the previous video, we will now add the logo and add the text and the input texts and the button. So let's continue and add the logo to our page. Now the logo is a JPEG file. So we have to get this file and put it in our project. So I have this file on my file system on desktop. Let's go to desktop and get the logo file. So I will get this file, and in order to use a file in Android Studio, we have to add this file to the drawable folder inside RAS. So inside RAS there is a folder called drawable. Let's go there and show the file in Explorer. This is the folder that we're talking about. So let's paste our file here. Now we can use the file in the project. Now let's go to the layout file, our page, and add an image view. So the way to do that is add an image view. The width of the image should be, let's start by wrap content, and let's give it an ID that we will be using later in order to position other elements in the layout. So let's give a unique ID to this image. So let's say that this image ID is the logo ID. And what we need to add is the source file of the image. So as we said, the source of this image will be the logo file that we added in drawable. So the source file is in drawable and the file name is logo. We can find it here in the menu. So this menu includes the files that are in the drawable folder also. So let's add the logo here, and now we can see the logo in the preview here to the right. Now it looks a big it looks a bit big relative to our page size. So instead of wrap content, we can make the size a bit less. So let's say something around this. Now we have to position the logo. Let's go back to our original layout, which is here. We have to position the logo in the middle and give it a certain distance from the top of the page. So let's go to our project. Now there's something here. If we move this logo using our drag and drop method, it won't work, because the relative layout works in a way that we have to position elements relative to the page itself inside the XML file. So it doesn't work dragging and dropping the element as we are doing here. Now let's go and give first a horizontal position to this element. So how do we center it horizontally? There's a center horizontal attribute here that we can add. So center horizontal equal true. Now the logo is centered horizontally, and let's give it a certain distance from the top of the page. So in order to do that, we can use something called margin. So layout margin top. It means that we are giving the element a certain margin from the top of the page, and then here we can add the quantity or the amount of pixel that we want. Let's say 45 pixels. Okay, and the unit that we're using here is dp, which is density pixel. Usually the dp is dp unit is used in order to give size to width and height of images. So, and to give size also, or to give the amount of pixels that we want to position a certain element, or the amount of pixels that we want to give to a margin or a padding. So now we have the logo positioned in the center of the screen at a certain position from the top, at a certain distance from the top. Let's run our application and see what we have, which looks good till now. Now let's add the input texts here, the username and password input texts. So how to do that? In order to add the username and password, we can do the following. Basically, these are added texts. So by added text we mean input text. So the width is, let's say, match parent, and the height is wrap content. So this text is the username. So let's add a hint, and by hint we mean placeholder. So username, hint equal username. Now we see that the text here has a hint, username, and let's also add some text color. So let's give it a white color. Now we can do that using two methods. So we can add the color white here, and let's add a background. So let's add a text here in order to test our input text. So let's say the username is Eli. Now we have the text appear in white. Now there are two methods in order to change the color of something or a text. Basically we can write the color here, or the cleaner method is to add the color to our color file. So let's, instead of writing directly the color code, which is in the hexadecimal, let's go to res values colors and add the color here as we added the previous color that we used for the background. So the color, let's call it, let's give it a name, and we can just say color white, and the color code is easy here, it's FFF. So we have the white color added to the color list. Let's go back to our layout file and give the white color, which now appears in the menu. Okay, now the text is white. Okay, so this is our username. Let's add the password. The password also is a text. So the username, the width is match parent and the height is wrap content. We will talk a bit about these in a minute or two. And let's give it a hint, which is password. And the color, which is white. Okay, now we have an issue here, which is that these two texts are positioned in a wrong manner. First, they are on top of each other, and second, they are on the top of the screen. But what we want them to appear, the way we want them to appear is like this, in the middle of the screen. We have some, now we have to also update the colors, and we have to add the logo of the username and password here. We will talk about that later. Now let's just add the username and password themselves. Now let's give them a correct position. Now the username and password, as we said, are on top of each other. So first we need to position these in a manner that they are on top of each other. Now, in order to do that, let's use a linear layout. We can use a linear layout and include these two elements inside the layout itself. So let's write a linear layout here with wrap content, hide wrap content, and this linear layout should contain these two elements. Okay. Or we can, let's do it another way, which is more easy to understand. First, let's create a linear layout. Linear layout. The width is wrap content and the height is wrap content. Let's give this layout an ID. So the ID of this layout will be, let's say credentials linear layout. And we have to specify an orientation for the layout. So now as we see here, the orientation of the layout here should be vertical because the username is on top of password. So let's go and give it a vertical orientation. So orientation equal vertical. Now we have a linear layout, but the layout is still empty, so we have to add the username and password inside the layout. So let's first add the username, which is an edit text. It has the width, let's give it a width of match parent and the height of wrap content. Let's also give it an ID. We'll use the ID later, either in the layout itself to position the elements or in the Java file, in the main activity Java file, in order to make this username and password functional. Username and password input text functional. So let's give it an ID, which is username ID, and let's give it a password. Let's give it also a certain text now, text value, which is, let's say, LE, and let's close the tab. So we have the username here. Let's also add the password. Let's add an ID. Now the two text elements are on top of each other. One more thing here, let's add a certain text just to make text appear. So let's call this text password. Let's also give a color to the texts. So text color equal color white, the one we defined in the colors file, and here text color also for the password also equal color white. Okay, now as we said, we have a linear vertical layout where whenever we add an element, it will be positioned below the element, the previous element. Now we have these two elements on top of each other, but what we want to, the way we want to position these is at the middle of the page, horizontally. Let's make them at the middle of the page horizontally and somewhere below this text vertically. So in order to do that, we go to the linear layout and the parent layout of the texts, and we just position it horizontally, and we give it a vertical position that is below the logo. So we use the attribute layout below, and we give the ID of the logo in order to know which element we want the layout to be positioned below. So as we see now, the layout is below the logo, the layout including the username and the password. Let's also give some padding to the layout. So padding top equal, let's say 25 pixels. Excuse me, this is not padding, it is margin. Margin is different than padding. So now the layout has a margin from the logo. Okay, so let's end this video here, and we'll continue later with the layout itself, giving some more attributes to username and passwords, and we will also be talking about the buttons.